amending how we amend the Constitution. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. The move to make it harder for voters to change the Ohio Constitution is gaining strength. Secretary of State Frank LaRose and Republican State Rep Brian Stewart want to make it so 60% of Ohio voters would have to approve changes to the Constitution. Right now, it takes a simple majority. This week, Senate President Matt Huffman said he supports the move. Republicans also made it so every proposed amendment, including those proposed by lawmakers themselves, would require that 60% majority. Critics say it's a move to thwart expected votes on protecting abortion rights and changing the way we elect leaders. Julie Carr Smyth, is this going to happen during the lame duck session? Are the lawmakers going to pass it to put it on the ballot?
I'm almost certain the answer is yes. It seems to be fast-tracked. There was a lengthy caucus, I guess, if you will, over that measure yesterday in the House, or this week in the House, and I just think that the political will is there on the Republican side, especially with Huffman saying that he was going to support it. It was sort of a question because it came out of the House whether the Senate would support it, but they seem determined.
Derrick, it's hard to change the Constitution. 60% seems like a reasonable margin to change the guiding legal document for Ohio law.
You know, no matter how reasonable it sounds, the power is in the people. And if the people want to change the Constitution, they should have the right to do that. Constitution is sacred, and I'm not saying that everything that's put forth to change the Constitution should be there, but it just seems like every time that that things don't go the Republicans' way, they change the rules in order to make it harder.
Mahek, it follows other states voting to support abortion rights, even conservative states like Kentucky and Kansas. I mean, there has to be more than a coincidence that this is coming up right now.
Well, we can name a lot of coincidences here. It's not about abortion specifically. I think we need to raise the bar, and the legislature is raising the bar for themselves as well. This would apply to all initiatives to make sure that you don't have these outside lobbying groups spending millions of dollars and misleading Ohioans. In fact, last year there was a green initiative bill that was floating around in Columbus, and a judge in Franklin County, I have to read this, a judge in Franklin County said it was $87 million in Columbus taxpayer money going to a secretive green energy deal. Now, this individual who was pushing for this, it's the largest scam in Columbus City. He is going to be behind bars because a Franklin County judge deemed this to be not truthful and false. In that
case, this was a City of Columbus case.
Correct.
That did not happen. Then the city changed the charter to allow that, to prevent that from happening again, but they didn't require a 60% margin to do it, to make that change in the charter.
Well, 50+1 is just not necessary today. Look at issue 1 and issue 2. We passed that in our state by over 70%. So why not increase the bar to ensure that we don't have other groups coming in spending thousands of dollars in secret and wasting our time, our taxpayer dollars, and not protecting our Constitution?
Derrick, a lot of groups have lined up to oppose this. The argument's going to be keep special interest out of the Ohio Constitution. That's from the supporters of this. The other argument's going to be lawmakers are trying to take your vote away. Who wins that argument?
Again, it's the voters that suffer in Ohio. You know, the voters should be able to make those types of decisions, not legislators. If the voters want that, the voters have the power to put this on the ballot themselves to do that.
This would be on the ballot in May, correct, Julie,
Correct.
If it passes during the lame duck session?
And ironically enough, I guess it'll have to pass by 50+1, 50% plus 1, and then it'll make it, should it pass, harder. I should note that this is at a time when you had mentioned the other states and the abortion issues. Those are passing we were very surprised when Kansas passed this, being a conservative state, but it was about 58%. Other states are passing it right around there, somewhere between 50 57, 58, 59%. And so it's a little bit strange that the Constitutional Modernization Commission had suggested 55%, and Representative Stewart and Franklin Rose have picked 60, given those facts.
Heck, why not 55%? If you win 55% of the vote, that's a 10-point margin. Borderline landslide, that's a clear majority. Why not 55% instead of 60?
I think what the legislature is trying to do here is increase the standard for everybody. You don't have 55% right now to have any passage of bills and margins when, especially with vetoes in place, right? So why not have a higher bar for anything to change the Ohio Constitution? I think it's absolutely important that we protect that sacred document. And at this point, 50+1 just it didn't make sense. And we're going to have continued special interests coming from other states. Let citizens decide. It's going to be on the ballot. Let them decide if this is going to be helpful to them or not.
Derrick, any compromise possible here? Could you lower the number of signatures you need to collect, make it a little easier to get on the ballot, then to get the 60%?
I mean, all of those things could be on the table, to be quite honest. But again, you have a Republican governor in administration. You have a Republican Senate. You have a Republican House of Representatives. This is about power. That's the bottom line. This is about power, to keep power in the control of the Republicans.
It'll be interesting to see. Florida did this in 2006, and it passed, raised the level of 60%. It passed with 57% of the vote. So it's happened before. And that was because the document was getting too long. There was no big issue looming there. Anyway, the current to legalize recreational marijuana would not require a 60% margin. Supporters of legal marijuana for fun are not trying to change the Constitution. They are just trying to change state law. They have collected signatures to put a proposed law before state lawmakers. Those lawmakers are expected to receive the proposal next month. They then have 4 months to approve it as is, no changes. If they don't, supporters would have to collect more signatures to get it on the November 2023 ballot, next November. Julie Carr Smyth, this was a court settlement. The leaders promised to bring this before lawmakers in January. Are they going to live up to that promise? Do we know?
I don't know that we know for sure, but I do think that these sorts of things do bring pressure on them because, when the people come forward, and this is an issue that those who are trying to amend to the supermajority issue, they're talking about this is a process that they think works and can work. And so I imagine that they will act in order to not have that ballot issue out there.
Mm-hmm. Would it pass, Derrick?
Would it pass if the
recreational marijuana? This is the treat marijuana like alcohol group.
If recreational marijuana makes it to the ballot, depending on what it is, if it's just recreational marijuana, it passes in the state.
Because they want to treat it just like alcohol. So
Yes.
you have to be 21, it's going to be regulated by the
Yes.
state board and things like that.
It will pass in this state. Several states have already went to recreational marijuana, and it depends on who you ask whether it's something that people support or not. I mean, I would say the majority of people want recreational marijuana. But there's pros and cons to it. I mean, there's the workforce issue, there's business, there's all types of legal issues that go along with that. So we'll see.
Mahek, is it a good idea? We have legal medical marijuana in Ohio. Michigan has legal marijuana for fun.
Well, we have legal medical marijuana, but there's only 22 conditions that is permitted right now. If you talk to parents with autism, there's such a huge push. Why aren't we adding more medical use to that list? So I do think we need to open that up in the state and allow, again, the voters to decide. This is a long time coming. Most of the Ohioans are going to other states to allow for use. And so we should put this on the ballot and let the voters decide. But I do think this would pass. I agree with Derrick.
There is an effort, Julie, to widen that list, lengthen that list of conditions that would be allowed under the medical marijuana law. Is that a preemptive strike to try to damp down enthusiasm for the recreational bill?
I think a little bit. I also agree that it's part of just we are constantly revising this law that we have, and it becomes this competitive thing, like we saw in this state with gambling over time. Opinions began to change and evolve as it became the law in surrounding states, and now we're starting to see that with Michigan and other places are talking about it, not necessarily border states, but I think that as a country, we're kind of evolving on this issue.
Derrick, where does the money come from if this does get on the ballot? Does it come from the pro-marijuana legalization camp, the businesses, or does it come from opponents?
I think that it comes from, pro legalization organizations across the country that would like to see the expansion of legal marijuana in Ohio. I mean, Michigan has it already, Illinois has it. There's a number of states that are surrounded that surround Ohio that have legal marijuana. So I think that you'll have money from a number of different special interest groups and wealthy people.
Yeah. Mahek, I don't have a medical marijuana card, but I heard from friends that do that it's all branded already. There's a brand out there called Clutch, and it's got a crown on it. It's not like other states where the medical marijuana is B32. So it seems like Ohio is already ready for this, should it happen.
I think Ohioans have been ready. I think these business owners are waiting for more market opportunities so they can grow and expand their licenses, their cultivation process. Ohio was smart in being slow and methodical, but now that the state has it under control, allow it to be more business friendly, open it up so that cultivators and others can actually expand their businesses, provide more work for Ohioans as well.
Absolutely. And the only thing that I wanted to add to that, so if recreational marijuana does happen to be the law of the land in Ohio, I would hope that lawmakers would make some concessions for people that have been in prison for marijuana, so that there's some expungements to going on for those that are just, those petty marijuana dealers that are doing jail time now.
I think that is a part of this bill that's before lawmakers, correct? Julie, it's been a while since I read it.
Yeah,
but
I think so.
This was hot and heavy back in the summer. We were pretty up on it, but it's been a while.
Right, and I mean, with what Biden had done with the pardons in that area, I think that's also, there's pressure building there as well.
All right. Lawmakers are in the middle of their busy season, the end of session and a lame duck session. The biggest issue looming over the legislature is Ohio's abortion law. A court decision has put the current law of banning abortion at the detection of fetal activity on hold. Some abortion rights opponents want to ban the procedure at conception with no exceptions for rape or incest. There was talk lawmakers would try to pass a stronger ban during the lame duck session, but that appears less and less likely. Mahek Cooke, Dobbs' decision was in late June. Ohio is a very strong anti-abortion rights legislature and governor. Why not just do it in the lame duck session and get it done?
Well, we passed the heartbeat bill, and that ban did go into effect until the Hamilton County Court judge banned this from moving forward. So in terms of ramming another bill through when we already have a decision pending in the court just doesn't make sense. I think we need to focus on what's at hand right now: education reform, tax reform, and some of the lame duck priorities that could really help impact us in the short run. We already have the heartbeat bill. Most Ohioans agreed upon it, and we voted those legislators in again and again and again. So it's definitely going to pass. We will be a state with a heartbeat law in effect, and I don't think we need to push this anymore. We need to focus on some of the other priorities right now.
Derrick, what is your take on this?
Well, as Mahek mentioned, we're a heartbeat bill state. I think that, pushing any other laws could jeopardize what they currently have on the books. So I don't think that there will be some efforts to do an increased abortion bill in Ohio, but I'm not sure if it's gonna make it through lame duck. They may have to pick it up in the next General Assembly.
I'm thinking that it's more likely that not an extreme bill, but one that takes into account the short experience we had with the heartbeat bill in effect, where we had a lot of problems and a lot of cases, obviously the 10-year-old rape victim having to go to the other state. And I think that there's some rumbling that, we would try to look at clarifying a few of the things that were brought to light at that point, things like miscarriage care and, birth control and other things so that there's more clarity as opposed to more restriction.
Looking at the calendar, and abortion rights opponents have played the long game here, but playing this out, if lawmakers were to, are they waiting for a possible May ballot issue to pass that raises the threshold of changing the Constitution to 60% before they pass a more restrictive abortion bill that perhaps bans abortion in all cases after conception. Mahek, are they just waiting to see how this 60% deal works and then go extreme, or they don't want to go extreme first and then give fuel to the fire to the opponents of that 60% bill?
Well, I think we already passed the heartbeat bill, so it's worth waiting to see what the
But
courts
there are
do.
lawmakers at the State House who want to go even further than the heartbeat bill.
And look, as a new mother, I'll tell you, life upon conception, I do not want to force my personal beliefs on anybody else, but we are truly a state that has become more and more conservative. And if there are exceptions out there, lawmakers are willing to sit down and talk about it. But to sit here and say that Republicans are trying to push this ballot issue so we can prevent abortions 100%, that's not the goal of this. The ballot initiative is completely different, and voters get to decide that. So, in my opinion, completely two different topics.
Well, and I think that the abortion measure, I don't know, to Matt's point, I don't think that necessarily it would matter whether they did that now or not, because the heartbeat bill, the D&E ban, the ban on telemedicine abortions, the ban on, it goes on and on. There's not really that much more to go.
I think that folks are getting fed up with all the bans and all of the proposals at the State House that get continuously more extreme. And I think if you continue down this path, you're going to have a situation where, some folks are going to start getting voted out of office. I know that we just voted in a new General Assembly. We have a re-election of the governor. But
those all strong abortion opponents, though,
right.
All those folks.
Yeah.
And voters overwhelmingly put them back in there.
Yeah, I think that there were some other reasons why they got reelected. I mean, we've had some good economic success in the state. I think the governor did a really good job with COVID. But some of these extreme abortion bills and initiatives, I think the voters are just getting fed up with them.
All right. Our next topic, Governor DeWine says he supports a move to severely limit the powers of the State Board of Education. The bill before lawmakers would move control of the State Department of Education to the governor's office. The 19-member board would be left with duties like hiring the state school superintendent and licensing educators. Many past governors have called for this change, but this effort comes after Democrats won 3 elected seats in November. Derrick, does this make sense to have education in the governor's office? Let whoever the governor is, let him or her call the shots when it comes to education policy. Listen,
The governor definitely should have someone in his office that's looking at education across the state. But again, this is another power play because the Democrats were looking to have the majority on the state's Board of Education. And it's no coincidence that this is happening right now because it's an opportunity for the governor's office to take power back from that Board of Education. This Board of Education is going to be limited to just, menial things, and they won't really have any real power. The people of Ohio put those members of the board in those positions. And so it's another power play, again, by the Republicans to exert power.
Julie, is this all about the money? I looked at what the State Board of Education actually does because I wasn't quite sure exactly what they do. But one of the things they do is the State Board shall administer and supervise the allocation and distribution of all state and federal funds for public school education under the provisions of the law. There's a lot of federal and state money that goes to education.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. Governors want to take that back because John Kasich as well wanted to. And the idea is that you want to be able to take all of the funds, and education is, I think, the second or the third largest chunk of money in our state after, I think, prisons and Medicare, right? Mm-hmm. But, so they want to take that and be able to spend it and move it around and use it to their will. It's just not an easy thing to do. It's the way that our state is set up and our Constitution and our laws. It's a check and balance type thing. That board is a combination of districts and at large and
governor appointees.
Right, and governor appointees. And so it's intended to work like that.
Mahek, is this just a power grab, and won't this benefit a Democratic governor when they're in office?
I think is going to benefit students. We know that our educational system has been a mess for years and years. My mom was a public school teacher, and I can tell you firsthand, kids were behind then, and they're more behind now because of COVID. So I think it's the right move for the DeWine administration to get in and try and clean this up. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter who the governor is. This is about our kids today.
Is this a power move, though?
I
Because
don't
of the
think
3
so.
seats?
No, absolutely not. I mean, our kids are behind because of COVID. We should be funding our students, not bureaucracies. And there's a backpack bill. That's really where our focus should be. Instead of on the school board, which are not making good decisions for our kids, let's give the governor the authority and a balanced budget so that he can fund students, not institutions.
Interestingly, it's coming at this time nationally where there's a huge new kind of momentum at the school board level on the conservative side, because this is one of the areas that conservatives don't feel like they are being heard and are trying to take over various school board positions at the local level, and in some cases state boards as well, because of various concerns around the school.
Okay, our last topic. For the second time in 3 years, Ohio State University is looking for a new president. Kristina Johnson announced this week she would resign in May after only 2.5 years on the job. She did not give a reason for her decision. OSU and its Board of Trustees do not give a reason. The Columbus Dispatch reports the board asked Johnson to resign. Julie Carr Smyth, we've seen this before. Presidents come, presidents go, and we don't quite know why.
Yes, I mean, particularly once they decide to go, it's not necessarily in OSU's interest to go into all those details. Generally, it is disagreements behind the scenes that have to do with, either the operation of the university or how the board wants it run and versus how the president wants it run. And so, and it is kind of shocking in this case because she's only halfway through a 5-year contract, and it was an expensive search, and she's has a pretty wonderful resume.
Oh, yeah. Derrick, there was no real public controversy with Kristina Johnson. I mean, unlike, Gordon Gee had his gaffes, and it wasn't his fault, but Michael Drake had to deal with the band situation right off the bat. Right. Kristina Johnson, she had Intel, and she got a ton of money from Intel. I mean, I don't know. This really was shocking when you look at all this, what's going on.
Well, I mean, from everything that we can see, she did a pretty decent job while she was here in her 2.5 years of her 5-year contract, right? The theme of the day is power, and I think that this is the struggle between the powers that be, whether that be the board, whether that be faculty senate or folks that are high up within the faculty, whether it's community leaders that didn't like the direction that the university was going. But it's unfortunate for the university because we did spend a lot of money on this search, and now here we are again trying to find a new leader that's going to have to fit into this culture.
Mahek, is an outsider going to look at this job now and say, I want to go work there? I mean, the outsiders that have been here in the past 20 years, Karen Holbrook, she filled out her term but left on not the best of terms. Michael Drake, okay, filled out his term, still not warm and fuzzy on the way out. And now this situation with an outsider, with Kristina Johnson.
I think we look for an insider this time, maybe somebody who's in the state of Ohio or at least has an understanding of not only the board, the direction that Ohio State wants to go, and the faculty. It's unfortunate that we're in this situation again. As Julie and Derrick have said, we've spent a lot of money. What I'd really like to see, though, is a thoughtful report from that independent investigator released that tells individuals what happened, because anybody who's going to look at this position wants to know what not to do. And if there's an issue, you can be methodical and thoughtful about this, but we deserve to know.
Of course, the university says it wasn't an investigation, it was a review, so it's kind of semantics there.
And how much did that review cost us, Mike?
I'm sure we'll find that out. I don't think we're ever going to see the results of that review. But Julie, just real quick, this always gets huge news in this town. I've worked at other states, the university presidents are important people, but it's not the mayor, it's not the governor.
It's true. Ohio State is just, it's the big thing here. It's, it's the sports team, obviously, and I think people care more about that than they really care about a lot of other things.
I mean, I care. I'm a proud employee of Ohio State University.
I'm a
but
proud graduate,
I
so
mean,
I think that
a graduate,
the
yeah.
academics, and it is also one of the largest universities in the country. So,
All right, time now for our final off-the-record parting shots, and we will start with Julie Carr Smyth.
next week, I think we will look for Bill Seitz' voting laws changes bill to go through, and they've made a lot of revisions to it, but I think it'll come out of the State House next week.
This is the perhaps photo ID and limiting early voting times.
Right.
Derrick.
Mike, I got nothing. Ohio State lost. I mean, everybody's devastated. That's my off-the-record comment. I'm sorry.
All right, well, you still have hope they're going to make the college football playoff.
I
though.
do. I do.
You do.
And hopefully we'll get some redemption.
All right, and Mahek.
I'm going to follow Derrick here. Off the record, I think Ohio State gets another chance to play Michigan and beat them this time.
Well, for Buckeye fans like you all, who are still upset over the loss to Michigan, there is a solution. We should change the rules so that in order for Michigan to win the game, it has to win with a 60% margin. Alas, it would not have helped this year because Michigan won by capturing 66% of the points scored. So maybe it should be a 70% margin. We'll see if that happens. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Please continue the discussion on Facebook. And if you miss any of our shows, or if we are preempted by fundraising programs like we are this week on Sunday, you can watch us online at WOSU.org or through the PBS video app. And give to WOSU at WOSU.org. Help us with our fundraising. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.